Americans eat an average of 5 eggs per week. Now, if I do some quick mental math, that means that nearly 87,000 eggshells are finding themselves somewhere every year. And let's be honest, for a lot of people, that somewhere is the landfill. But what if I told you there are actually a lot of uses for those eggshells in the garden? Here are 5 reasons to save your eggshells this year.
But before we get into the first reason, let's talk about eggshell preparation. You know, when you crack an egg open and you drop the egg either into the bowl or straight into the pan, you're always left with a small amount of egg white inside of the shell. In most cases, not all, but most, you will want to rinse that out. Now, I know that's a bit tedious, but it literally takes 2 seconds and you're gonna rinse your fingers off anyway from cracking the egg open. So once you've rinsed out the last little bit of the egg white, you're left with 2 parts of the egg. There's the outer shell and then there's the inner shell lining, like residue. This is a sort of opaque white film that is hard to peel off all the way, but you will want to get rid of it. The reason you don't want the egg white and the shell lining is because these parts of the shell can rot over time if not properly treated. And that can attract rodents and other pests. So it's best to clean up your eggshells a bit. We live in a really dry climate and these bits of the eggs dry up really quickly, but before using them we always bake our eggshells or toss them into the grill to cook off the extra bits that aren't the shell. 300 degrees Fahrenheit in an oven for 30 minutes or so should do the trick. But make sure that when you take them out, the inside of the shell has browned and cooked off the residue. The next step of preparation is going to be to crush up your eggshells. Now, depending on which of the reasons we're going to highlight you're saving your shells for, you'll need to crush these in varying degrees. So we've got the rough crush, where you put them in a plastic bag and crunch down by hand or with a rolling pin or something. Then you've got the fine crush method, which is where you toss them in a food processor. Now you can go for the coarse grind or a fine grind. We usually opt for a bit more on the fine side. We do recommend if you go this route, you cover the top of the food processor with a towel to keep the fine powder from poofing out and making a mess. And when you open up the food processor, it's probably best to do it over a sink and outside because the powder is going to poof out once you crack the lid. Now that we've covered those preparation techniques, let's get into the reasons you need to save your shells in the first place.
Reason number 1 is soil supplementation. Eggshells contain 2 major benefits to soil: calcium and alkalinity. Approximately 94% of an eggshell is made up of calcium, and the other 6% is carbon material and trace minerals such as magnesium and selenium. These are great for your garden soil. As far as the high alkalinity in eggshells, if you have soil in your garden that is particularly acidic, perhaps a conifer has been dumping needles for the past few years, or maybe you've just tested the soil, maybe not tasted it with a pH strip. If that's the case, a little eggshell supplement can help balance out the acidity, making the soil a little bit more hospitable of an environment for your finicky plants. The first way that we recommend you apply these eggshells is through a rough crush. Now let's say you're doing some serious soil amending and you're growing a cover crop with the intention of tilling it at the end of the season. Before tilling, you would scatter your rough crushed eggshells over the soil surface and then mix it in with the rototiller. That way the calcium will get deeper into the soil. Of course, you can also just top dress your soil with eggshells and they will eventually find their way down into the soil. This approach will give you what we call a slow release of calcium, not an immediate implementation. So think long-term supplementation. It takes a long time for the shells to fully break down, so you won't get an immediate blast of calcium for your plants. With a vinegar extract, however, you will be able to provide that calcium fairly quickly. Now we have a whole video on exactly how to make this mineral extract amendment, but the short version is you soak your eggshells in some vinegar for a few weeks and then boom, you got yourself liquid calcium. And this can be watered into your soil, diluted of course, right along with any of the other liquid amendments that you've got. One final way that eggshells can benefit your soil is through turning them into activated charcoal or biochar. Eggshells are great to turn into charcoal and they burn pretty quickly. Biochar is a phenomenal substance, sometimes called permanent compost, because it doesn't decompose or break down for thousands of years, while retaining a lot of nutrient and microbial activity. We have a whole video coming out on how to make activated charcoal, so be on the lookout for that.
Reason number 2 is that you can use eggshell shards as a natural pest deterrent against slugs and other soft-bellied bugs. Slugs can be a frustrating nuisance, and sometimes you have to throw everything you've got against them if you're going to stop them. One of the things that we have had success with is using eggshells around the base of our delicate annuals as a layer of protection against the slugs. The idea is that a coarse, crushed eggshell will create a little shard that makes travel over the top uncomfortable for a slug or snail. Make sure to apply liberally and not in the powder form. Now, eggshells alone probably won't single-handedly stop an infestation, but when your plant babies are vulnerable, you want to make every resource available.
The third reason you need to save your eggshells is that if you have chickens, you are throwing away a vital mineral supplement that could help your chickens produce thicker eggshells. And that mineral, you guessed it, is calcium. It sort of makes intuitive sense, right? Chickens require large amounts of calcium to create eggshells at all, let alone strong ones. Some people supplement their chicken's feed with crushed oyster shells, but why not just use what they're giving you in the first place? I like to make a coarse grind and then mix it into their feed. And then I've also left the crushed eggshells in a supplementary feeder so that the hens have access to the calcium they need. Chickens are pretty intuitive eaters.
The fourth reason you shouldn't throw away your eggshells is because you can always put them in the compost bin. Now, these can go straight into the pile, even unwashed, cooked, or crushed, but if you can, we recommend that you go through the processing of rinsing, pre-cooking, and blitzing them up beforehand for directly adding to the compost. I recommend getting the shells into fine powder as possible as it breaks down and imparts nutrients as soon as possible. It can also be a little anti-aesthetic for your garden beds to have partially decomposed whole eggshells hanging out. Alternatively, before adding to your compost pile, you can also add them to your bokashi bucket first and ferment them before hot or cold composting them. This way you don't have to rinse, cook, crush, since bokashi fermentation is powerful.
And finally, the fifth reason that you should save your eggshells is because they are a great addition to worm bins. If you have a vermicomposting operation, your worms will thank you for your crushed up eggshells. Even worms need calcium, along with the other trace minerals that eggshells provide. Worms are fond of neutral pH levels in their habitat, so if you want to add something like bokashi food scraps directly to your worm bin, mix up the food scraps in the crushed or powdered, I recommend powdered eggshells, before incorporating the acidic bokashi in with your worms.
And those are the 5 reasons to save your eggshells. If you are someone who is growing plants, making compost, raising chickens, or keeping worms, don't toss those eggshells. They are free nutrient packages that can be used in a variety of ways.
If you learned something from this video, you should give it a thumbs up. As always, we also love to hear from you. We've actually got some really great ideas recently from the comments that you guys have left. So please let us know how you use your eggshells, or ask any questions that you have and we might be able to answer those. If you want to see more content like this in the future, of course, please subscribe to our channel, and thanks for watching.